Today, I'd like to talk about the connection between your brain and sex. Understanding how sex affects your brain can improve your role in the hay, and it may also shed light onto other parts of your health. It's not the easiest subject to study. Test subjects might have to masturbate in an MRI machine, so research is still developing. But scientists are starting to unravel the mystery, and here's what we know so far about your brain and sex. Sex makes us feel good. That's why we want it, like it, and spend so much time hunting for mates. The pleasure we get from sex is largely due to the release of dopamine, a neurotransmitter that activates the reward center of the brain. Dopamine is also one of the chemicals responsible for the high people get on certain drugs. Now, taking cocaine and having sex don't feel exactly the same, but they do involve the same brain regions as well as different regions of the brain. Caffeine, nicotine, and chocolate also stimulate the reward center. A 2002 study out of the University at Albany looked at 300 women and found that those who had sex without a condom had fewer depressive symptoms than women who did use a condom. The researchers hypothesized that various compounds in semen, including estrogen and prostaglandin, have antidepressant properties, which are then absorbed into the body after sex. Now, this is good news for anyone who is in a committed relationship, but if you're still playing the fields, then you probably shouldn't give up on condoms just yet. There are other ways to boost your mood, but really no other way to prevent sexually transmitted diseases. Now, what about those feel-good chemicals maybe going full blast during the act, but what about after? According to researchers, there is such a thing as post-sex blues, and about 1/3 of women participating in a study reported having experienced sadness after sex at some point in time. While it's possible that regret or feelings coerced might be the reason why, researchers still can't explain the connection between the two at this point. Don't skip sex when you have a headache. Research found that doing this deed may relieve your symptoms. In 2013, a German study proved that 60% of participants who had migraines and 30% of cluster headache sufferers who had sex during a headache episode reported partial or total relief. Other studies have found that women who stimulated an area of the G-spot had an elevation in pain threshold. It took greater pain stimulus for them to feel pain. Researchers didn't study why this was so, but other researchers have attributed to the effect of oxytocin, the so-called bonding hormone that helps mothers and babies bond, and which also has pain-relieving properties. Each year, fewer than 7 people per 100,000 experience global transient amnesia, a sudden but temporary loss of memory that can be attributed to any other neurological condition. The condition can be brought on by vigorous sex, as well as emotional stress, pain, minor head injuries, medical procedures, and jumping into hot or cold water. The forgetfulness can last a few minutes or a few hours, and during an episode, a person cannot form new memories or remember very recent memories. Fortunately, there seems to be no lasting effects. Or at least it might be if you're a rodent. A 2010 study found that compared with rats who were allowed only a one-night stand, rodents engaged in chronic sex once a day for 14 days consecutive grew more neurons in the hippocampus, a region of the brain associated with memory. The findings were backed up by a second study, also using mice. It remains to be seen if regular sex also has this effect in humans. The same study that linked frequent sex to a brain boost in rats also found that the rats were less stressed. This works for humans as well. One study found that people who just had sexual intercourse had better response to stressful situations such as public speaking than people who had not or who had engaged in other types of sexual activity. How did sex ease this stress? In this case, it was by lowering blood pressure. Sex is more likely to make men sleepy than women, and scientists think they know why. The part of the brain known as the prefrontal cortex winds down after ejaculation. This, along with the release of oxytocin and serotonin, may account for the rolling over and falling asleep syndrome men claim to have. Although we have some insight to the brain and the role in sex, there's still a lot of question marks. And with years of research and willing participants, hopefully more questions will be answered so we understand more about this universal desire we call sex.